Blog Talk Radio.
Good evening and welcome to Nightlight. It's been a long time since I've been on at 9 o'clock, not at 9 o'clock on Friday, and it's kind of a cool experience to sort of flip around to different nights to see just how all of them have a different energy. I'm thrilled today to have Mary Joyce on as a guest. She is an amazing author as well as one of the creators of a website that will keep you captivated for hours. She's eclectically oriented and has a curiosity that has no limits. Her books will educate and awaken questions within you that will lead you to enlightenment on many levels and probably generate questions that will take you in new directions that will deepen your insight as to the reality wherein we live. They are all of her books are a must-read in my opinion. I found all of them different, unusual, unique, informative, and a true joy to read. In addition to editing her website, which I want to talk about in a minute or two, she has worked for two major metropolitan area newspapers as a writer, columnist, artist, Sunday magazine editor, and feature editor, and on the side she's written magazine articles and 6 books. I don't know if she has spare time, but if she does, I bet she does something creative with it. Her career includes working for a Fortune 100 company, coordinating art and printing for talking children's books. And in that capacity, she worked directly with many creative teams, including those at Marvel Comics, Golden Books, Mr. Rogers, Bernstein Bears, and Steven Spielberg's E.T. book staff. She's also worked for the world's largest private printing company, an air pollution control agency for a major city, a community college, and did the advertising for 8 successful political campaigns. Her books include Underground Military Bases Hidden in North Carolina Mountains, Cherokee Little People Were Real, and the Tangible Evidence of Jesus that Jesus left behind for us to find, all of which are available on Amazon. And I must add also that while the material inside of them is terribly informative and provocative and thought-provoking, there are also pictures all over the place, so that they are an amazingly wonderful, quick read, but the information in them will give you reason to question and look more deeply into a lot of aspects of things that we have been taught throughout our entire lives. So, without further ado, if she's not, leaping over tall buildings at a single bound, welcome to the show, Mary. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. That was a very nice intro. I appreciate it.
Well, I meant every word of it. It's you have so many things that you've done, and I think I do want to talk about the books, but the one of the things that is of great interest to me that I found fascinating was your website, which is Skyships Over Cashiers. And at first, the pollen has gotten to me, so I apologize for croaking at you. It is an unusual name, and so you want to explain how your website came into being, because it's a fascinating website and it covers a tremendous amount of material.
Well, the name started because we had so many different kinds of UFO activity happening in and around Cashiers. And Cashiers is one of those mountain towns that's way at the top of a ridge, and it has a larger population in the hot summer months when all the people from the lowlands come up to the mountains to get cooler. But it's kind of a resort town that goes kind of quiet in the wintertime. And we started out because of sightings there, and that's why we picked the name. When we picked the name, I don't think we saw how the website was going to evolve, and we certainly do a whole lot more than that, than just UFOs. We've got sections on cosmic miracles and global links and skyship photos, and a section on Bigfoot and ET and other alien or other beings, and we just get into a lot of different things.
Absolutely, and I think you sort of tap into a lot of things that have the possibility of being some sort of I don't want to say conspiracy, because that's not the word, but you're bringing a lot of information out into the light that has not been there before. Maybe that's a better way of putting it. And it just feels as though there's so much information here it's a beautifully put together website, has a tremendous amount of photography in it, and you do kind of put information out there as it comes in. It's not something that because I noticed that I've gotten a couple of notices for some of the latest things, the UFOs in the sun, for instance, that were up there, and then also the article on vaccines, which I found very interesting. So there's a lot of information here. How, I know I read that you co-authored it. I don't know if the other person is
the one on vaccines. What I did was the original letter that we received from Dr. Labo was rather lengthy, and what I try to do in everything, if at all possible, on the website is to keep it tight, easy to read. People kind of turn off if things get too what we call gray, and so I did a synopsis and did quotes within the synopsis of her original letter, just so it would be easier for people to get to what I thought was the most important information. Sometimes if people open up a page and it's just, continuous gray type, they won't dive in and find these nuggets of really good information, and I try to bring the nuggets forward.
Well, you certainly do a magnificent job, because I had a wonderful time reading through it, and it's interesting because some of the areas that you have dived into, that looked into, are areas that have been of interest to me over the years, so that I was fascinated and delighted to see that I wasn't the only one that was saying, "What's the matter with this? Something else is going on." Is anybody
now there
noticing
are
this
a lot
material?
of websites that are run by people who are totally into conspiracies, And that's not, we don't want to go that way either, but we want to bring forward the information, which the vast majority of people simply do not know or do not know very much about. And we just try to make it very palatable.
Well, I think you do a magnificent job. I really do. And you, one of the books that you wrote had to do with the little people that the Cherokee wrote about, and how the tunnels under the it was the, I forget which university, Western.
It's Western Carolina University, which is here in the mountains of Western North Carolina.
Okay, and go ahead.
Okay. I was going to say that all three books, that the most recent books I've done, which came out in the 2013, 14, and 15. So I've managed to get one a year within the last 3 years. And they're not related. Every subject is different. And I never intended to write any of them. What happens is I usually somehow stumble upon information and I go, oh, I can't find this anywhere. And if I had been able to find it somewhere else, I wouldn't have written the books. But with the Cherokee Little People, I went from being one that just thought, well, those are just old legends, and I did not pay much attention to them. And one day I got into a conversation with a man where I worked at the time, and he was a very well-respected man in this area, World War II veteran, pastor for over 40 years, just a genuinely sincere, nice man. And he said, no, the little people were real. And he said that he helped after World War II to do some of the early construction at Western Carolina University. And when they cut into, virgin land, they would find these little tunnels. They would vary in size to some degree, but they could be as small as like 2.5 feet square with rounded tops. And after that, he connected me with other old-timers who had been involved with construction, and I ended up interviewing a total of 11 people, all, for the most part, old-timers. 9 of those had actually been involved with construction on the campus. When they were putting in sewer lines, when they were building new buildings, they would find these little tunnels. So there was like a vast network beneath the campus of Western Carolina University.
Did anybody ever take one of those little computer generated vehicles that they used in some of the pyramids to go up the tunnels to follow them to see where they led?
Well, this is where you get into a strange aspect of the academic world. They tend to be more interested in building new buildings than having to stop to preserve archaeological sites. And if possible, they want to move on as quickly as possible. After I wrote the book, I did get a letter from a man who had been a student at the college or at the university, I think in like 1999, 2000. And he said he and his buddies were just off campus down by the river one day, and the head of security at that time came by where the guys were. And he was carrying a box that he described as being sort of like a shoebox. And the security guy actually told him that these were little bones they had found while doing construction, and he was going to rebury them over in an area where there's an ATV trail. So they were, trying to avoid being shut down for their projects. So that's one of the reasons that things weren't presented like they should have been.
Well, I don't know if you're familiar, but here in the Northeast, there used to be over 800 stone chambers that no one could figure out who made them, and we're down to about 100 now. They've been destroyed by roads being widened and things being plowed under, and another case of archaeological treasures being totally destroyed without finding out, who made them and why.
Right.
And
now,
go ahead.
If you appreciate sort of ironic humor, I'll briefly tell you this one story. One of the older buildings on campus is called the McKee Building. And when they first started building it, they cut into virgin land. They found tunnels going off to the east from the building. And later on, they decided to add a basement to this building, which is something you can most easily do in the mountains. You can't do it in flat land so easily. So they actually cut away the backside, and they created a basement beneath the first 2 floors. So it's 2 stories from the front and 3 stories from the back. When they cut into the second section, they ran into the tunnels going in the opposite direction. Today, those tunnels are behind a wall that was put in there to reinforce the building. And this was done about the time I learned about all this. This was somewhere around 2000, 2001, and they put in this thick reinforcement wall. On one side of that wall, there are still at least 2 tunnels left. On the other side of the wall, and this is where the irony comes in, is the anthropology department. So here we have, I know, I mean, it's just insane. And, but that's the truth. And I went and interviewed the man who at the time was the head of, he had a long title, but he was in charge of architectural drawings and construction for the campus. And he said that he and most of the people on his staff had seen the tunnels before that wall went up. So he said they definitely were there. He had made the suggestion that I go to another department at the university and see if we could get them to use their, I'm not going to be able to think of the name of it, it's ground-penetrating radar, to see if they could locate where those tunnels still existed. And I tried several different ways and could get no cooperation on that, so we weren't even able to track it down that way.
Well, according to the Cherokee, how far back do the little people go? Are we talking 1,000 years, or are we talking 500 years? How far back do they go?
The little people were here before the Cherokee arrived. The Cherokee were originally from the Great Lakes region, and they migrated to the mountains of Tennessee and North Carolina. And when they arrived, they noticed these well-tended gardens, but they didn't see any people. And then they finally noticed that at nighttime, these little people would come out from beneath the ground, tend the gardens, and take the produce back underground with them. And so the Cherokee people originally called them the Moon People. And nobody knows how long they were here, because they were here before the Cherokee.
Wow.
And to even muddy the waters more, there are 3 very distinct descriptions of the little people. The one you hear the most about today in this area are little people that look a lot like the Cherokee, just a smaller version, like maybe 3.5 feet tall, something like that. Many of the Cherokee say in the back parts of it's not technically a reservation, but in the reservation there are still little people that exist. But anyhow, so we have that description. That original description of the Moon People were those that had a blue tint to their skin and large eyes, which sounds very much like the ant people of the Hopi, or the aliens that look sort of like the Greys. And then we have a third description, and the third description is very much like a leprechaun, and with red whiskers. And according to the old timers, the Cherokee did not like the ones with the red whiskers, and they would try to kill them off. And support for that concept actually came from some of the moonshiners. Back in the 30s, they were building their moonshine still on the top of one of the mountains, way off the path, and they came upon this pile of little people bones, and they quickly covered it up, didn't speak about it until after Prohibition, because they didn't want people to discover their moonshine still.
Their stills.
And then one more thing on the ones that look like leprechauns. There was a major flood here in the 1940s. I mean, one of those that's truly historic. And this 5-year-old boy found this oval-shaped, I'll call it a medallion, that has a face on each side, a profile that looks like a leprechaun. I have a picture of it in the book, and I have it right next to a leprechaun face, so you can see the similarity. Nobody knows how old that was because so much soil had been washed away, and this was deep in the dirt.
Okay.
And so,
well, just to give everybody a sense of timeline here, the Cherokee have been in the mountains of North Carolina since the end of the last ice age, so that's about 10,000 years BC. So about 12,000 years ago till today.
Right. Now the dates if you go to different sources, the dates will vary, but they've been here for quite a long time.
Thousands of years.
Right. And there's also another mystery which may connect with the little people because the Cherokee can't explain it. There is a large petroglyph rock I went and measured it one day. It's approximately 20 by 15 feet, and it's like a rock that's at a slant, and it has these petroglyphs all over it that don't look like petroglyphs you see anywhere else, and nobody has been able to explain them, and it's called the Judiculla rock. And so people think it might have been done by the little people. Lots of mysteries here.
And the United States has so many of these kinds of mysteries that people don't hear about, and children aren't taught about. I mean, here we have little people right here in the United States, and the only place you really hear about them are in Ireland and Scotland, and yet they existed here. I'm fascinated with the fact that the tunnels had rounded tops. I think that's, although rounded tops are more stable than a flat top, so would make great sense.
It would be a good engineering thing. And these tunnels, all of them that I've heard anything about, have been cut into this very, very dense red clay, and they stay intact for a very long time.
Thousands of years. When you consider the extreme weather and all of the things that happen over thousands of years, that those tunnels still exist or existed is phenomenal. I'm surprised that there wasn't some sort of I know in Europe when they're digging and they hit parts of old ancient villages and stuff, everything has to stop until it's
supposed
dated
to happen.
And
that's supposed to happen here too.
Seriously.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened?
So that's why things were so quickly done, and that's why the head of security was taking the bones off quickly to rebury them someplace else, so that people wouldn't find out about it.
Well, didn't somebody use one of the skulls as a paperweight at one point?
Yes, he was in the science department, and he kept this skull on his desk like a paperweight or decorative paperweight, and he just always said it was a child's skull from the mound, Indian mound, because there were two supposed mounds, and I can explain that if you want me to, but then one day another teacher came by and looked at it real closely and said, "This isn't a child's skull. It has all of its wisdom teeth." So that was one of the interesting finds. And there were two, like I said, they called them Indian mounds on the campus. The old-timers said they weren't really Indian mounds because they could remember when the large mound in particular had a tubular vertical hole, going right into the top of it. And the old-timers said they believed that was just a pile of dirt from digging out these tunnels.
Wow.
Which is kind of interesting.
Well, wouldn't you think that now, of course, you've made everybody aware of this? Wouldn't you think that they would at least do some sort of archaeological study just to see? I mean, there have to be more bones.
Well, I tend to be hopeful, and there is a new person coming in before September who's going to be, I don't know his title, but he's going to be a new person who's involved with archaeology. And as soon as he has enough time to get acclimated, I am going to make sure he gets a copy of the book, and maybe he will be open to getting into this more. And maybe there's even a possibility that the administration has brought him in to deal with this, because I have very much tried to get the information to, like, the head of the university, and there's always hope that somebody wants to come clean with the information.
Now, how long ago was all of this done? Were there any pictures taken at all?
Of the tunnels themselves? No.
Yeah.
Because so much of this initial digging was done like 30s, 40s, 50s, and even the mentality at that time was, they weren't that interested. Even the regular people that I interviewed, some of them they regretted that they hadn't been more interested at the time, because now they see the significance of it, and at the time they didn't.
Wow. Well, it's very much like all of the bones of the giants that were found in the 1800s and in the early 1900s that were just sort of thrown away or ground into powder or taken as souvenirs instead of being
what's
preserved.
really, really regrettable, and we did do an article on the website a year or so, maybe a year ago, and it was about how the Smithsonian became the collecting museum for these giant skeletons that were found all over the country. And then they just kind of, it was all shut up. And so there was a man who recently wrote like I said, it can't be more than 2 years ago at the most, wrote a book about the giants and about the Smithsonian. So the lights being flashed into these, people's eyes, and things will change.
I certainly hope so, because the giants have been something that I have certainly looked into, and there's a tremendous amount on my website about them. I find it abhorrent that we have all of this, this antiquity here in this country that is being totally ignored. The kids in school are being taught that, Columbus discovered America, that the Indians were here, and they were heathens, and so we tried to educate them, and then they got wiped out by the disease that they caught from us. Right. And the reality is, Columbus and America was never lost in the first place. Right. And the Europeans were here before that, and before I do believe that they got the copper from the copper mines in Minnesota to get the Iron Age going. So, we were definitely unknown entity at that particular time, and the giants were here before the Indians came here, because especially what tribe is it? They're in Nevada.
There's more than one tribe that have talked about them.
Oh yeah, but there's a tribe in Nevada that had the story about the red-haired giants that they herded into a cave, and
and set the fire in front of the cave. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they found the bones, and nobody knows where those bones are.
Right.
I mean, it's sort of like. It almost, and I used to be a teacher, so I am, I'm incensed to think that here is material that is fresh and new and should be put into the textbook.
Imagine how the young people would be excited if this was the kind of history that was presented to them.
Oh yeah. It's mind-boggling. Columbus actually did capture a giant that he tried to take back with him, but the giant got loose and swam to shore. Columbus also, in his journals, and I'm not a Columbus fan because he was a mass murderer, but we won't go there. But he also recorded in his logs that he saw an unidentified underwater object that came up out of the water and flew off.
Okay.
So he saw a UFO.
Can I clarify that one? Because I've heard
Sure.
that, I think that has even been presented perhaps on Ancient Aliens. I went to San Salvador Island, which is supposed to be the island that they think Columbus landed on first. And I was there at the same time of the year, that I think it was in October, when he would have landed. And to this day, the natives who live on that island build fires that time of year, smoke fires, to keep the mosquitoes away. And when they put new wood on the fire, you have these lights that flare up. So I would not assume, because you can, to this day, you can see that phenomena. And so from a distance, it can look like the lights coming out of the ocean. I'm not sure that what he was reporting in his log was actually UFOs, just because I've been there and seen that phenomena.
That could easily be. I don't know. I don't know how far he was in his journey. I do believe. Now, my husband researched this. I didn't, but I do believe from what Patrick said, he was far out to sea when he saw this glow come from the water and then take off into the air. But again,
if that's the case, then it would have been a UFO. But
yeah,
if it was anywhere close to the island, this phenomena could also explain it. And I'm one who believes in UFOs, so I'm not trying to poo-poo the idea.
No, I've actually seen one that landed on my campus, so I know they exist. But yeah, I do believe Patrick said he was well out to sea when this sighting occurred. So, but again, I'll have to, I would have to go and find it in Columbus's. I'll do some research because that's a really good point you made.
You have to a copy of his log to be able to figure that out.
Yeah, but and again, the Alamo. I mean, there's so many of the things that our history books put out there that really are not true. They just aren't true. All of the stone chambers that have been all over the country, the stone walls in this country, there were over 500,000 miles of them in 1879. That's enough to go to the moon and back.
Mm-hmm.
Colonists didn't have time to do that. They were surviving.
Right.
Come on, give me a break. So and the little people especially, I think that is such a charming story, and it's overwhelming to think that their tunnels, for the most part, have been sort of, just absolutely plowed under, literally.
I will be having another story within the next week or two at the most, because since the book came out, a construction man has come forward and said that he found 5 little tunnels when he was doing a construction project. So if people want to keep in mind, they can maybe in 2 weeks check skyshipsovercashiers.com. It'll be under ET's Bigfoot and other beings. And so that'll be another update on little people.
Now, this was just in one area. I mean, are the Cherokees saying that it was just that one area, or is this something that, that there were colonies all over the place, or was it just the one area?
I hear stories about the little people only here in the Appalachian, southern part of the Appalachian Mountains, because there's also stories in Tennessee, which would be, immediately west of North Carolina. But those 2 states are the ones where you hear the most about the Cherokee little people. That's
so sad. That's really, I'm sorry. You kind of think, I mean, having, of course, the size you're talking is far smaller than midgets or dwarfs. And it sounds like they were very delicate and small, as opposed to, midgets and dwarfs appear to be a little stockier, and
well,
it sounds like they would.
The dwarfs look out of proportion, but the midgets don't.
Yeah.
And so the little people would be a little bit more like the midgets, but typically the reports I'm hearing is like 3.5 feet tall.
Yeah, they sound even smaller than midgets. So that's very sad. I think that's terrible.
So.
And you're right. I think that there should that attention should be paid to that, and whatever is left should be preserved. And if nothing else, you can talk. I would hope you could talk the college into using it as an attraction for tourists.
Oh yeah, if they had
just
kept a wall with a glass window in it, where you could at least see the tunnels, that would. And if they had done that early on and preserved, I'm not saying all construction needs to be stopped. I mean, that's ridiculous. There's been too much history. But at least save some of it. And it could have made it the basis for a really good archaeology department. It would have attracted people to come to the university for that reason.
Unbelievable. So I kept every interview I read, it was like, oh, for heaven's sakes, how can people be this,
stupid?
this stupid? Yes, stupid is a good word.
Right. And what I did with the interviews, which since you've looked at the book, I've done a synopsis at the beginning of each interview. So if somebody wants to get a quick interview or a quick overview, they can do that. But I deliberately kept the Q&A interviews that I did with each of these people because I thought there's a possibility there may be a clue in something that they say that I might not have been aware of at the time of the interview, which could be more significant later. You follow me? So the original interviews are intact.
Now I know that little bones were found. Was any pottery found, or any implements of any sort?
No, the only pottery I've ever heard of would be actual Cherokee.
Wow. Well, happily, at least you've put it out there so that at least the story is preserved and authenticated.
And I also put photos and location maps, and it's my hope that some people with archaeological credentials would take that as like a guidebook and see if maybe it could help them perhaps make some more discoveries. That would be my hope.
What a great master's or PhD thesis for somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Just digging for and authenticating the presence of those tunnels.
Mm-hmm.
So, another book you have written, which fascinated me beyond belief, was Underground Military Bases Hidden in North Carolina Mountains. What prompted you to write this book?
Okay. It really goes back to the website, which was started in 2008. And at the time, I was working at a place where I had interactions with a lot of people. And there was this one couple that kept coming in, and they would start conversations with me. And it would always be kind of delicately getting into the subjects of things I had on the website about UFOs. And I found out later they were really checking me out to see if they trusted me, is basically what was going on. And they finally agreed to have an interview with me, or I could have one with them, about the UFO sightings they'd had. Well, when I get there, I find out that was secondary to what they really wanted to talk about. And the woman, excuse me, the woman had grown up as a child in a family where her father was in very high security work. And because of what he knew and what the family knew, she finally told me about this underground facility here in North Carolina. Now, mind you, I've written about 5 of them in this area, but she's the first one that told me about one of them, and she said it was city-size, 6 stories deep, totally self-sufficient with, water and electricity and, everything that you would need to survive underground. And so I put her story on the website because she came across as credible and this might be a true reality. So then, not too long after that, another man who again was coming in and checking me out to see if he could trust me, I guess. And he eventually let me know that he had a high security position, and he wanted to let me know that story that I'd put on the website was true. And he was very reluctant to be interviewed for the website, but he eventually decided that he would write a statement that I could put on the website. And it's in the book, and it's exactly as he wrote it. What's interesting is he wanted to make sure that he couldn't be identified with the statement. So he deliberately changed his style of writing so it couldn't even be connected to him that way. And he confirmed that that's indeed was happening there. Before I go any further, let me just let your listeners know that I write about 5 different underground facilities here in western North Carolina. Each one of them is under a major tourist attraction. There's one under the Smoky Mountains National Park, one under Mount Mitchell, which is the tallest mountain east of the Mississippi, one under Linville Gorge, one under Sugarloaf Mountain, which is adjacent to Chimney Rock State Park, and one next to the Devil's Courthouse, I should say, beneath it and to the west of Devil's Courthouse, which is a rock formation along the Blue Ridge Parkway. So I find it very...
Okay, are they all protected by the World Heritage Treaty?
At least some of them. And I'm glad you brought that
Wow.
up. I had not heard of this treaty until I began to wonder why in the world are we seeing foreign troops in our forest. And you've read the book, so you know it goes beyond that. But
Oh, yeah.
I moved here in 1998. It wasn't too long after that I would hear from people who were hikers and hunters and campers that they would sometimes see Russian troops, German troops, and what are known as blue hats, which are the UN, and in our forest. And the question always was, why can they be out there doing military maneuvers in, quote, our forest? And then I learned about the World Heritage Treaty, which was signed in 1972 during the Nixon administration. It turned over the jurisdiction of some of our national parks and forests to the United Nations. So even though these parks like the Smoky Mountain National Park, which most people have heard of, even though it's in our country and we think we own it, we don't have jurisdiction over it.
Right, and one of the other things that I found fascinating was that it doesn't matter if property has been turned over or put under the UN protection. It doesn't matter if you have personal property in there; it's gone. You know, our country has signed it over, and not only that, but they also create or have created. I think was it Yellowstone? There was a case where a man had a gold mine outside of the park area, but the World Heritage people went in with lawyers and established a buffer zone of 150 miles beyond the actual park boundaries.
Isn't that awful?
So that nothing could be done, mining or actually living, I would imagine too.
Mm-hmm.
So that these people, have lost. Whoever had property within 150 miles, it was in that buffer zone, and so the UN, I would imagine if they lived there, they could continue living, but maybe not. But I know that in a couple of places in the United States and one in Australia, where the World Heritage has come in and said, nope, there's a buffer zone boundary. You have to get out, and you can't be there.
Yeah, these World Heritage sites are not just in our country, and they're other places in the world. So when people start to talk,
hundreds of places.
Mm-hmm. So it's.
I mean,
I have a map in the book of where they are in our country, so people might find that interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting, but as well as I found a map, and I probably can't find it real fast, but it showed every other country in the world, and there are, I mean, the Eiffel Tower and the Louvre, and I mean even Auschwitz is well, where Auschwitz was, but they're heritage places and places of antiquity and history, and you know, of worth to kind of make a statement as to what we have created to this point in time. And what blew me away was, and what I don't understand, I still don't understand, almost all these sites, whether in this country or in other countries, they, you know, they're already protected. You know, they're national parks. They are already protected. So why did we have to sign a treaty with the UN to protect what is already protected?
I don't know. Maybe it sounded really good at the time, but I wish that some people with some clout and power would take the steps to get us out of that treaty. Personally.
Well, I absolutely agree with you. It just doesn't make sense to me. And you know, frankly, the UN has never been what I considered. It's never been a power to be reckoned with of any way. Yeah, I will admit that the World Heritage, when they were doing the Aswan Dam, went in and helped to move some of the historic sites there away from, you know, where the water was going to be, so that some of those were protected. I'll give them that. But you know, it's sort of like, you know, we're taking a look at losing sovereignty over some of our property that you know, is a national treasure to us. And now there are foreign troops in some of these places doing exercises, or even more, because as you said before, some of these parks have military bases underneath them. And if that's the case, why?
Mhm.
I mean, you're talking tanks and all sorts of stuff.
Well, if you mention the tanks, I mean, if you want me to, I can talk about what's going on at Mount Mitchell, because that's where.
Yes, please do.
Again, because of the website, we were approached by a man who had recently retired from a medical career. He'd also been a medic during the Vietnam War, and after he retired, he still had plenty of energy, and he went to volunteer to work in the medical unit for the National Guard here in North Carolina. And somehow somebody found out about the fact that he had FBI and Army intelligence clearance. And so instead of using him in a medical capacity, they gave him some surveillance assignments. And he was put in charge of a squad of men who were to spend some time in the deep woods around Mount Mitchell, just observing and surveilling Mount Mitchell. And they saw what they call the blue hats coming out of the backside of Mount Mitchell, out of a building out of the backside. And they came out in 4 sets of 2 men each. And there would be a man carrying a very heavy backpack, the kind that has to have the metal reinforcement. And then there would be another person with him. And each of these teams took a different side of the mountain. And so this man, who we call Hawk, he and his squad split up and followed each of these groups. And what they did was they would follow like animal paths and stuff through the forest. And the lead man had a fold-up military shovel, would dig a hole about a foot deep, and would take out a sophisticated sensor from the backpack of the other man, bury it in the hole, and then cover it up. And each of these teams zigzagged back and forth, on each side of the mountain, and so the entire area has sensors so that somebody can tell if anybody's coming, and it's they're very sensitive, so they could distinguish animals from people. And why are they doing that? And then there was another group that were on surveillance at the same time, and they were located in Marion, which is a town that's east of Mount Mitchell. And during the night, a train arrived, and between 20 and 25 tanks were unloaded and put on flatbed trucks. And then these trucks took the road up to the top of Mount Mitchell. Nobody ever saw the trucks come back down. And in his preparation for the surveillance work that he did, his superiors had told them that there was a 20-story deep facility beneath Mount Mitchell. And I can't remember the words he used, rather dramatic words, saying that the entrance to it looks just like a mountain, side of a mountain, and opens up. And we've gotten reports of that in other places too, where it looks just like a mountain, and it's a secret entrance.
Wow. And I just out of curiosity, a lot of these places that you're talking about, has there been increased UFO activity around them?
There are, yes, two of them that come to mind right now. UFOs have always been around them. And one of the interesting stories was at a place called Sugarloaf. It's a mountain that's near Chimney Rock State Park. And in 2010, two of us from the website went up there to interview a woman who lives way at the top of the mountain. And to get there, it was a narrow gravel road, very steep, with lots of hairpin turns. And when we got up there, I was seated so that I was facing her, but I could see out the window to the road from where I was seated. And while we were there, unmarked SUVs came up the road, went very slowly by the house, and then went to the end of the road, which was, not far at all, turned around and came back real slowly again, almost to the point of stopping in front of her house. And we all just kind of chuckled. It was like they knew what we were up to. And she had quite a few interesting stories. One of them in particular was, she said that one night the entire top of the mountain, which would be, still higher than they were, lit up, was under floodlights all night long, and big heavy-duty helicopters would drop earth-moving equipment, and this went on all night long. And the next morning, she and her husband were just very, very curious, and they hiked up the rest of the way to where this activity was going on. And she said the whole shape of the mountain had been changed, and there was like fresh sod that was down. And this is one where she has seen UFOs over that mountain. And she says there were two different kinds of ETs that were over that mountain. And she described some as being grays, and then she described some as being very evolved and very spiritual. So she said the ones that were like the grays did seem to disappear after a while. So that's just one of the stories. She had more to tell, but that's one that kind of sticks in my head.
It just and you spoke at some point in the book about there being an energy that made you nauseous or uncomfortable.
This is the first underground facility that I ever heard about, the one that was told to me by the woman initially. And it is under a facility known as the Pisgah Astronomical Research Institute. It's known around here as PARI, P-A-R-I, which is an acronym. It was a facility during the Cold War that was used for monitoring the skies and with satellites and things of that nature. At some point after the Cold War supposedly was over, it eventually was turned over and is now today said to be an astronomical research place. Now, you can only get there by invitation. I think on Wednesdays they'll open it up so the public can get in. It's labeled as an educational center, and usually public educational centers, it's not difficult to get into.
Right.
But this one it is. And a couple of former Air Force men patrolled that area for a while because they were curious about it. And they said that on one occasion they saw a guard at the gate who was dressed in black SWAT outfit. And yet other times it's just a gate and anybody can drive in. When I get close to that entrance, and I'm not the only one who's experienced this, I get this feeling of like agitation, or I can't say it's electrical, but it's like an electromagnetic interference, and it's not pleasant, and it makes you want to get out of there. And one of our other whistleblowers who was at near the entrance to the one under the Smoky Mountain National Park experienced something similar, and she said that and she had military background too, and she said when she got there, going all the way up, it was sunny and blue and beautiful and the birds were singing, and she said when she got close to that place you couldn't hear a bird, and she began to have these kind of feelings worse than I had. She got to the point where she almost felt nauseous, but she could hear and feel machinery type activity beneath her feet, and she said it felt very much like something was driving pylons into the ground like you would use in building a bridge.
Right.
So back to the original question, back to the Perry Center, there's been UFO activity around there forever, and some have even reported UFOs going in and out of a lake that's just to the west of the Perry Center.
Well, I know that the government has been experimenting with electronic pulses.
Mm-hmm.
And I, a number of years ago, we have 2 Indian reservation casinos near me, and we went and visited them.
Where are you exactly?
I'm in Connecticut.
Whereabouts?
So we have.
I mean, not your home address. I'm not asking for that.
No, I got you. Near Waterbury.
Okay.
Sort of the middle of the left-hand side, kind of. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when we went in, we just went out of curiosity, and well, for those who don't know, I am kind of sensitive. I do all sorts of energetic stuff, and I'm a psychic and an empath and stuff like that. But we went in, and I heard. The only way I can explain it is there was a harmonic that was being played constantly. And I looked at my sister. I said, "Isn't that annoying? Do you hear that sound?" And she said, "No." And I looked around, and people were very mellow, sitting at machines and stuff like that, but it was driving me crazy. And so I got rid of my $20, and they did, and we left, and once we got away from it, I said, "Oh my God, my head feels so much better." And we went to the other one, and the same harmonic was being played. And it blew me away that nobody, I mean, I can't have been the only one that heard it, but everybody seemed to be very mellow and very happy, and it was like they were dumbed down, just kind of mind dead. And And I just couldn't wait to get out of there. And the other thing that I've experienced, there's a place along the Appalachian Trail up here that supposedly everybody in the town either committed suicide or was murdered, and so nobody goes there anymore. But And so a friend and I thought, why don't we just hike in, and not realizing that the Appalachian Trail is really rough stuff. So we went in. I think we had a bag of chips with us or something. But the closer we got to this location, this place where this town supposedly was 100, 200 years ago, the thing that we found so strange was there were no insects, there were no birds, there was no noise. You couldn't even see an ant. I mean, it was usually in woods, it's buggy and there are gnats and stuff like nothing. No animals at all. And it blew me away. And then, of course, we got lost. But we got out okay. We heard somebody cutting wood, and we just followed the sound of it was getting dark, and we didn't have flashlights. But we didn't come that close to where this village was, and yet the closer we got, the more quiet it got, and no animals, no ants, no gnats, no mosquitoes, no moths, no birds, no nothing. And
gotcha.
I'm thinking that our government is experimenting with something that can do that to us, to people. Lord knows they sprayed LSD in the subway during World War II just to see what it did with crowds. So I wouldn't say our government was beneath them to, test their harmonics on everybody. And frankly, I'm beginning to think that they are doing it to the whole population, starting in like July 15th. And I'm because I can't tell you the number of people that are talking to me about what's happening. Everybody's crazy. Things are going wrong, and and you can't put
just the news I was listening to earlier this evening. More people are getting shot and killed and suicide, and it's just like everybody's getting absolutely insane.
Exactly, and I can't prove it. I don't hear anything, but I'm certainly the recipient of that same kind of stupid. I mean, I look at it as though, holy mackerel, I thought I had everything taken care of, and now everything's falling apart. That is just so annoying. But other people react a lot differently to it. They do stupid things. They say stupid things. Marriages break up. There is more going on during this time frame than I can remember in a long time, and of course, full moons always bring out the nuts. But this has been almost a month of crazy people, and it looks like it's going to go on for another month. So, I am wondering though about the military bases, because you did say that some people who had taken their off-road vehicles, came across somebody that they had military rifles that they were patrolling with.
Machine guns. That was at the Smoky Mountain National Park, and there were some people on their all-terrain vehicles going on one of the back roads, but it just happened to be near where it looks like where the entrance is. And they were greeted by people in park ranger outfits, but they had machine guns, and told them they couldn't go any further. They had to turn back.
You have, I respect you greatly for putting information out there and not really drawing conclusions from it, but leaving it for everybody to kind of either make their own conclusion or think it's just pure fluff. But do you have an opinion? Do you have any even an inkling as to, first of all, why would there be these army bases beneath the mountains? I mean, are the people in your area ready to riot and secede from the United States? And
most people don't know. Most people don't know. Nothing's been written about this stuff until I did this book, and I've been able to pull things together. And when you start putting the pieces together, you go, oh my goodness. If you go back to the earliest underground facility that I'm aware of, it was right on the border of Virginia and West Virginia at I think it's the Greenbrier. It's one of the big old hotels, and it was designed.
Oh, yes.
I think it's Greenbrier. It was designed as a place for the elite from Washington to escape to if there were to be a nuclear attack.
Yeah,
Well,
but that's so well published,
that is so out of date that everybody can go, I think, and have a tour there now. So that gives you a clue of how much more advanced these underground facilities must be now. And one of the Air Force people, former Air Force people, made the statement, which I included in the book, that he believes, and I also believe, that there's almost like an underground subway system that goes all along the Appalachian Mountains. So one of the reasons I believe that is that we've gotten reports from just ordinary people who have experienced vibrations and mechanical sounds beneath their home for X amount of time, it may be just a few days, maybe longer, and then it doesn't happen anymore. Well, you, I'm sure, have seen photos of these huge underground boring machines. They're like big, tubular machines that are bigger than a train, and they can go through 7 miles in a day, just kind of melting through the earth. So I know where some of these have been along the Balsam Ridge. So if you go south from where this one lady lives and gave this report that's in the book, you will run into the Perry Center. And if you keep going south, it's like there's this other one that goes the other direction that would head off toward the Smoky Mountain National Park. At least it appears to be happening that way.
I had heard, not through you, but I had heard that there was something very similar to that was connecting the East Coast to the West Coast.
I've heard that also. But as far as the book goes, I've stuck strictly to what I'm able to really get
validate.
Good witnesses for, and to the best of my ability, prove that at least to myself that these people are genuine, and there's enough evidence that it gives everything credibility. And again, this book is designed like the one we referred to with the Cherokee Little People. There's lots of photos, maps. I always try to tie the words together with the pictures, no matter what I do, because just the pictures or just the words don't do an adequate job.
No, and I think you've done a brilliant job. I really do. I think one of the things that I found interesting was that, of course, Area 51 is something that everybody, knows about, as far as that's technically where they took UFOs after the crash in 47 and things like that. But it seems to me, and it's almost common knowledge, though it can't be proven, that there are underground tunnels there and there are underground facilities there, and that there are even crashed UFOs and stuff like that there. The feeling that I get is that, do you feel that there might be possibly, not for sure, but might possibly be a UFO connection to a lot of what's going on here?
Yes, I do. I do not think that most of what's going on is for the good of the general public. And I think the rascals in the black projects of our government are in cahoots with the rascals among the ETs in some of these cooperative ventures. Does that answer your question?
Amazing. Yeah, that's gently put.
By the way, do you have any gentle music you could play for 1 minute so I can go get some water? My throat is just killing me.
I absolutely have.
Okay.
Yes, we can.
Okay, I won't even take a minute, but just a minute. Okay.
I'll give you 3 or 4.
No, a minute and I can do it. Okay. I'll be right back with you. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, we are back. I know we were talking about tanks and trucks and all sorts of things going into the mountains. Was there anything else that you have information of that were taken into the mountains besides the military stuff?
Probably one thing that's worth mentioning, it makes you wonder about the dark side of underground activity. One of the witnesses who came forward when he was a young man worked for a while at a Christmas tree farm, which is not far from the Perry Center. And people who worked there had seen animals in cages being taken into this facility. And, why would that be? Why? Why would they do that? And
animals. What kind of animals?
I don't think he gave me a straight answer on that. But it doesn't matter.
Okay.
I mean, that kind of facility, why would they be taking animals in cages into a facility, period? If it was just monitoring the skies. Makes no sense.
Yes.
And,
no, it doesn't.
No, not at all. And there was a time not long ago where there was this Rubicon Jeep that was pulled in front of where I was working at the time. And it had, I can't quote it now, but it's in the book, it had Army psychological secret stuff on the front of it. And I checked it out quite a bit. And like I said, it's described in the book, and I can't even bring it back right now. But it headed off in the direction of this Perry Center. And this vehicle had Army plates, and it was from Colorado. So what was a psychological unit of the military headed off in that direction for? So there might be some very weird things going on there.
Oh, well, if our government's involved, you can almost be guaranteed that it's really weird.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of really weird, from your website, and I highly encourage everybody to pick up this book. It's on Amazon. It's called Underground Military Bases Hidden in the North Carolina Mountains. It will certainly challenge you and make you wonder why and what's going on, and that's what it's supposed to do. But from the website, we hear reports of Bigfoot on and off. I've done research on it, and connection to the Yeti and to Sasquatch, and so you actually have met people that have experienced firsthand Bigfoot people.
Right. I think there's maybe 6 stories that I've done of interviewing people who've seen I'm going to say Bigfoot, who've seen Bigfoot.
Okay.
In fact, tomorrow I'm going to interview somebody else who has Bigfoot on their property. And the most recent story, which I think most people would find very interesting to read, is in the section which you can find on the homepage, which is ETs and Bigfoot and other beings. And just scroll down a little ways and you'll find a story, and the title is Valley of the Bigfoot and the Little Alien Dude. And we actually, there's lots of photos, and there's a whole big involved story that goes with it. But the story includes a photograph of what we really do believe is Bigfoot hair. And it's so convincing that we were contacted by somebody from California who was willing to put up the money to have it DNA tested. We haven't gotten results back yet, but believe me, that's going to be put on the website when we find out whether it's yay or nay. We will, do a follow-up on that. I don't know how much you want me to go into that story. It's up to you.
Yeah, I would explain how you heard about it and then how it evolved, because it's an amazing story.
One of the people who is like friends of the website is a beautician, and one of her customers was really kind of opened up with her and was kind of distressed about what was happening on her property. So that's how the connection was made, and it took I think a couple months maybe before she was willing to have us come to her property. And to get to her property, you had to go up to the top of a mountain ridge, and then there was this real narrow one-way road that went down into a valley. You actually went through like a ravine with a ridge on both sides, and it followed a creek. And when you got to the end of it, it opened up into a bowl-shaped valley, totally surrounded by mountain ridges. And there were 2 homes and a barn and kind of a pond. And what had happened was the pond had to be repaired, and when they were using a jackhammer on it, it suddenly went into like something hollow. And in hindsight, they put it together. But from that point on, they began to have Bigfoot troubles. And it started out with these big muddy handprints on their vehicles. Then they got into the vehicle. One time they actually turned on the car. It didn't go, but the lights went on. From there, they went to trying to get in the homes. And I have pictures of the handprints and the claw marks and everything else where they're trying to get in. And eventually the people moved out, and the Bigfoot took over the house. And there's pictures that are quite intriguing of scribbles and stuff on the wall. It started out like with a marker pen that just looked like scribbles. Then it began to look like writing. And most of this was done in a certain portion of the house, and most of the drawings were done at a lower level. We actually think that they're younger Bigfoot that were doing some of this, because many of the drawings are below the level of the light switches. So there's pictures of all that, and there's a picture of the hair, and it's quite an intriguing story.
Yeah, so many people, they just see, they think they caught glimpses and stuff like that, and I mean, you've actually, now did they see them getting into the car?
I think they've captured some activity with some cameras they eventually set up, but it's mostly this visual kind of proof that and again, it's on the website, and people can take a look at it and evaluate it for themselves. That's not the only good story. There's 2 other ones. If I'm mentioning this because you said you were interested in Bigfoot. One man who had to retire from the military early because of a health problem bought land adjacent to the national forest. So behind his property is totally undeveloped, and the mountain goes almost straight up behind him. And then about, I think, like 30 feet below his house, there's a creek and an old logging road. And his story started out hearing those typical Bigfoot sounds, like the log being banged against the side of a tree, that kind of thing. But it went way beyond that. One night he was on his porch, and he had what he calls a street light, but it was simply a light he had outside his garage. And again, he's on a very isolated old logging road, so there's not people around. And he actually saw a family of 4 crossing the road, which he has seen, a number of times since then. It's always the female that crosses the road first, then the 2 juveniles, and then the male. But I'm really getting out of order, because the next thing that he heard after the banging on the trees was it sounded like children playing in the creek in the water, and he knew there weren't any children around, so he was really puzzled by it. And it was the Bigfoot. And he got to the point where he would take his leftover food and take it down, I think, by the creek, and leave it for them. And this relationship with Bigfoot that he refers to as Fred, the male would come around when he would work in the garden, and he shared stuff from the garden with the Bigfoot. So it's
wow.
We have stories that go beyond the ordinary. And one other one I will mention for you, and I don't know if you may have to go into the archives for this, I'm not sure, but it's a wonderful story by Joan Ocean, or an interview with Joan Ocean, and she is probably the best known dolphin expert in the world and lives in Hawaii. But she had quite a great experience with the Bigfoot out in the west coast of this country. And she dealt with some that were quite evolved, probably more evolved than the ones we have here. But they could write notes, print out notes, very involved, more educated interaction. It's a fascinating article. So,
I mean, if that's the case, why have they not communicated more with
I think they
us?
have the good sense to be afraid of humans.
Yeah,
I do. I absolutely think it's that simple.
Somebody once said that I had to be very careful because people probably would like to dissect my head after I've passed or before, just to see what makes it different.
Makes it work? What makes it different?
Yeah.
Some things you simply cannot find in the gray matter.
That is for sure. That is for sure. One of the things you've recently put up on the website that I find fascinating are the UFOs that seem to be right, near the sun.
I find that fascinating, and that started because of a man in the Netherlands who contacted us because of the website. And what he was doing is he was taking NASA satellite photos, and there are satellites that actually monitor the sun continuously. And he would take these, and he said he would dust and clean them so that you could see them better. And there are these humongous ships that will sometimes appear around the sun, and the amount of detail that you can see is phenomenal. They look more like giant motherships that have a structure more like let's say a cruise ship. I mean, you can see mechanical layers to them. And if people are interested in those started getting put on the website in 2013. So go to global links. Okay.
My theory is that they are refueling. I believe that those ships operate using plasma or whatever energy a star emits.
That's possible. There's one picture that we posted, and again, you'd have to go into the archives to find it, but there is this huge circular ship, and they're not all circular, but it's almost like an umbilical cord that connects it to the sun, and it stayed there, God, it seems like it was 80 hours. So that might support your theory on that. I
mean, I don't, I'm a Trekkie. So I don't think it's, I don't know exactly what it is, but every time I have seen a picture of a spaceship, and they've been out there for a long time, people keep saying, what could it possibly be doing? I think they're refueling. I think that they use whatever, the solar flares emit to actually fuel their ships.
Well, they're also able to fly into volcanoes. They're able to do things that we can't quite fathom.
Well,
By the way, I think listeners need to know that these pictures that we have are of ships that are bigger than Jupiter.
Yeah, they're huge.
Just huge. I mean, they're like planets unto themselves. So anyhow, yeah.
Yeah, seriously, they'd have to be. But before we get much further, I do want to talk about your third book that you have out, because I found it fascinating, and that's the one that initially attracted me to the books, and yet, it's the last one we talk about, but it was to be honest, the first one I read, which is The Tangible Evidence Left Behind by Christ, and I find that it was beautifully done, because you started out the book with something that I've always wondered, and that's, we see pictures of Jesus all the time, but there were no cameras then, and nobody was doing little sketches. There were no court artists there to draw little pictures of him as he walked around or anything. So there was really no evidence as to what he looked like. And you found 2 letters, both written to Caesar, about him that did describe him very much as the pictures depict, actually. And that had to be amazing. I'm just wondering, was there anything from Josephus that you found that described him, or was Josephus later?
Are you talking about Josephus, the historian?
Yeah.
I did not include anything by him in the book. What you're referring to are 2 letters that were written, one by Pontius Pilate and one by another man who the name is in the book, but it wouldn't mean anything to anybody, I don't think. But Caesar is hearing about this man Jesus and is curious about him. So Pontius Pilate is describing Jesus for Caesar, and that's what that letter is. And it is a letter that's supposedly in the Library of Congress. Of course,
wow.
I printed the English version.
Yeah, I was going to say it was definitely not written in English, so it had to be translated.
Right.
But it was beautifully written. And I've read some stuff that was translated from that particular time period by people who were in power, and the flow of the words and everything is very commensurate with that time frame. But I found it fascinating that you started out with a physical description that kind of matched most of the portraits that have been painted, especially the classical ones. And you went into also the Shroud of Turin, and again, I've heard people lecture on the shroud. Some saying that it dated only from the 13th century, some that it was more ancient, and you did go into the fact that the parts of the shroud that were tested were really replacements that were done after the fire that.
Right.
The
shroud was kept in a silver box, and there was a major fire, and the silver melted and burned some of the shroud, and then some nuns came in and patched it. And I think they were trying to, when they took the samples early on, I think they were trying to preserve what was intact, so they were taking the samples from the patchwork. And, between that and the fact the smoke from that time period all affected the early readings. But what I found interesting was really microscopic, because they found one scientist, and the name is in the book, so if anybody wants to pursue it, they can, but he essentially took the old method of, how you pick up debris with a piece of Scotch tape. He did that approach, right, picking up the debris from the shroud, and the pollen was from the Palestine area. And one of the things that there was a number of different kinds of pollens that were found, but the one that sticks in my mind is a certain kind of tumbleweed that only grows in that part of the world, and it only blooms in the spring, which would give confirmation to the time of the crucifixion. And, when you have pollen and different other kinds of things that you can only find in that part of the world, it gives some credibility that the shroud might, be quite real.
Absolutely. And I also loved how you went into the, I've heard, I've been fortunate enough to hear some people speak who did one of the first scientific investigations of the shroud, and he went in as an absolute cynic who thought that they were going to prove this fake beyond a doubt, and ended up being an amazing believer in that. That's exactly what it was.
I think he was Jewish.
He
had no particular interest in proving the validity of it.
No, none at all. And it was amazing because every way that it could have been made a fraud has been disproven. There's no paint there. There's, it's not a photograph. It was burned into the cloth, and very much like when the atom bomb went off, there were pictures of the shadows of people that were imprinted onto the walls and things like that, so that given the thought that as the spirit left the body, it did so, and it
there was some kind of a energy release in some way or another when that happened. Yeah, that's what it looked like.
So that to me is the only way it could have been done, because it's imprinted into the fabric.
Right.
And so I found that fascinating, and I carbon dating and all of that. I mean, so much of it can be. They don't give you enough of a variant, and then I love how you went into the Joseph of Arimathea being, the relative being able to claim the body. I mean, you actually.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I just, you've hit upon so many things that are so solidly proven that you can't argue against it.
I think Joseph of Arimathea is a fascinating character, and there's quite a bit about him in the book. One of the things was, there were customs at that time that played into all of this. When somebody was crucified, they were normally thrown into a pit and buried that way. If somebody came forward and claimed the body, then the family could take it, but it had to be claimed by a male family member. Well, in the Bible, they just mentioned that Joseph of Arimathea was a rich man and he turned over his tomb for Jesus' burial. Well, it wasn't that simple. And in the Eastern Orthodox Church, they write about Joseph of Arimathea as being the great uncle of Jesus. And after Joseph the carpenter died, he took over the responsibility of Mary and her children, and he therefore had the right to claim the body. But he was a very complicated man, because not only was he a member of the Jewish Sanhedrin, he was also nobilis curio with the Romans, because he was in charge of the Roman mines, and he spent a lot of time on a ship going to southwestern England for the tin mines. And there are stories of throughout that part of England, old stories about him arriving in a ship, and that Jesus, the boy, traveled with him at least sometimes. And there is a well that's near the Camel River, and they built. It was where they would get water for the ship, and it became known as the Jesus Well. And as time went on, they built a small stone little chapel over this well to, protect it and preserve it. And I tried very, very hard to find out where it was, and finally found out that it still remains kind of in a cut-out hole in a golf course right there along near the river. And there's a picture of it in the book. And so the well is still there, and it's at a location that was described at that time being near the Camel River. There's also crosses found in that part of the world that aren't found anywhere else, and it shows they're called tunic crosses because it's the boy Jesus in the short tunic, and the boys would wear the short tunic until they went through bar mitzvah, and so they're very interesting, different kinds of information.
Absolutely, and that would explain why there's not that much. I mean, there is Joseph of Arimathea definitely was not really around that much because he was basically traveling a great deal. So
right.
that there was really not that much to say about him. And we have to remember, I mean, Josephus is one of the best sources we have, but of course he worked for the Romans. So, it's kind of like history belongs to the victors type stuff.
Right.
So,
and it's not the book written by Josephus. Now, I'm not talking about Joseph of Arimathea. That's not
right.
an easy read either.
No, it's not.
So that most people aren't.
It's not an easy read.
Most people are not going to take the time to try to carve their way through that one.
No, absolutely not. And yet, he's the closest source that did writing
right.
of any great
He was really
amount.
the only historian of that time.
Yeah. And he was he started out a Jew. So
mm-hmm.
He talked himself into being employed by the people that overran the area. Smart man.
Mm-hmm.
But I would think that his history reflects the desires of the people that were paying to have the history written.
That's probably true.
Well, he knew where his bread was buttered, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But your book has it's so much stuff that we don't often think about. We just kind of accept everything that is written by other people or what history tells us, and we don't question it. And you've really gone to great lengths to look for proof that Jesus kind of wandered around, and you came upon one of my favorite proofs, to tell you the truth. Somebody that I have enjoyed the writings of and the work of is Nicholas Roerich, and his paintings and his travels. He was a Russian archaeologist and writer, and he was a painter, and he actually designed the costumes and the scenery for a lot of the Russian ballets. But he toured the Himalayas on horseback or mule. I guess maybe it was a mule. Well, anyhow, he rode
a four-legged
something
creature
into the Himalayas. Yeah, he did. And what's amazing is his paintings are to me so spiritually energized. It's phenomenal. And he wrote about visiting a temple in the Himalayas that had books there that validated the fact that Jesus was there. Now,
in that chapter, I include him. I also include Kaspari, who was the woman who started the Montessori schools in the United
yep.
States, and they all ended up at the Himas Monastery, which is way up high in the Himalayas. And when she and her group arrived there, apparently the monks opened up to them, and the head librarian came to them one day and showed them a book and said, "There's proof here that your Jesus was here." And even Judge William let's see if I can remember his name now.
Douglas.
Again, my book has everything in it. My mind doesn't have everything in it. William Douglas, who was a Supreme Court judge, and he made a trip there and heard validation of the same thing. And if you think about it, there is quite a bit of similarity in the Buddhist teachings and in Christianity.
Oh, of course.
And Jesus studied there, and I think he was getting a lot of information from that tradition.
Oh, I would totally agree with you on that. I know for anybody who's ever in the New York area, Nicholas Roerich, there's a museum that has a tremendous number of his paintings in them, and I've been down there and visited the museum a couple of times, and he painted in tempera. So he took the powdered paint with him, melted snow to mix it, and painted.
I didn't know
and
that.
when you look at because tempera is basically tempera paint that the children start painting with. But the paintings themselves, his style is profound. It's been used in a lot of different books as illustrations, but you should check. I'm sure there's a website for it, or Google him. Lots of his work is online.
And quite a number of his. I have a whole page of prints of his some of his paintings that were done in Tibet.
No, he and his wife were part of the founding membership of the Theosophical Society. So you have a lot of different people who have checked out this particular rumor, and so many people have said, yeah, there is that book in the Himalayas that says Jesus was there. There are also other legends that say that he was in the United States and in Peru and in Brazil and in Polynesia. They all have legends that talk about a teacher, a master, a healer that was there and then moved on.
I include information in the book from the original book, which I don't know if it's still in print or not. It's called He Walked the Americas, and it was done by an anthropologist, archaeologist who traveled throughout the Western Hemisphere. I think the book was originally published in the early 60s, maybe. And
63.
Right, yeah, that sounds right. And what she did was she collected these ancient legends that went back before the white man arrived in the Western Hemisphere. So it could not have been, a Christian influence coming from Europe. And what's interesting is there is this man that is a prophet, a teacher. Each tribe gave him a different name, but he always sounded like Jesus. And sometimes they talked about him having the puncture wounds in his hands. By the way, in many cultures, ancient cultures, the hand included the forearm. So that might help explain why, the holes weren't necessarily in the palms of the hand. But
they had to be in the wrist.
The descriptions of Jesus are the same as the ones that were written at the beginning of the book by Pontius Pilate, and he always has the lighter hair with copper tints to it, and eyes that are changeable like the ocean. Sometimes they look blue, green, gray. I mean, they'll change. And the stories that he tells are very similar, not identical, but he'll talk, in one place he talks about the little lost llama instead of the little lost lamb, but the same basic stories. It's fascinating, really, really is.
Yeah, I just, it makes sense to me that if he traveled all over Asia and Europe, that it would make sense to me that he hit all.
It appears that he appeared in the Western Hemisphere after the crucifixion, because the markings in the hands would indicate that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And you do bring up the stones that were uncovered in Barrow's Cave in the Ohio River in southern Illinois.
And in the book, that I presented it a way which makes sense how those carvings got there. It's really too complicated to try to express over the airwaves, but it's in a very readable form, and I think people will find the story complicated but easy to follow, if that makes sense. But there's all these So
I have a cat trying to turn the computer off.
Oh, geez.
They get excited. Yeah, no, she's been known to disconnect me a number of times.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, most people that are familiar with my show actually are very used to me kind of having to come back in and saying, "Cat did it."
Oh.
You also you know, when you live with as many as 9, now down to 4, you know, the catastrophes happen. You talk about Mary Magdalene's lost gospel, and I'm very familiar with the gospel of the beloved companion, and it's interesting that you weave it in here, which, you know, kind of it talks about how it's been lost for a long time, and that it's kind of being brought out now into more of the general public being available to it. Where was it all that time?
Now we get into deep Christian history. There was a group called the Cathars, and I may not be pronouncing that correctly,
Cathars.
That were in the south of France, and remnants of that group held on and protected this gospel of the beloved companion, which is supposedly, you know, the writings of Mary Magdalene. And the Roman Church, you know, pretty much wiped out the Cathars, or however you pronounce it. And they, to this day, preserve the original copy because they still don't trust the Roman Church, that afraid they might destroy it. But in very recent years, this was put into English, and it's available for anybody to read. And I quote some of that in the book. There's a picture of the book itself, and what's in there is quite fascinating. And between that and the old writing that Professor King from Harvard put out for the world to see, that talks about quoting Jesus, and he refers to his wife. There's, you know, just a whole lot of information that indicates he was married. And though I did not include this in the book, and probably should have, at the time of Jesus, in order to be a rabbi, which he was, in order to teach children, which he did, you had to be married. So
yes, exactly.
You know, that puts a real interesting slant on everything.
It does, and not only that, but and you know, because of your background and because you've really documented things amazingly, you can't make the leap that I'm about to make, but there is a movement of thought that Mary Magdalene made it into France, and that she actually lived there and traveled around there, and there are certainly the Rennes-le-Chateau material, which goes into, you know, the fact that the genealogy of Jesus, you know, has been preserved, and but it does explain a lot that the beloved companion becoming more and more available to people who really, you know, want to be open to the possibility that perhaps she wasn't as the Bible has depicted her. You know, the Pope has finally said, no, she wasn't a prostitute.
Right, they finally admitted.
So it's
before we run out of time, let me get into a little bit of the family tomb of Jesus.
Oh, sure.
Because that is another, I mean, there's several pieces of evidence that indicate that he was married, and this one's quite fascinating. And again, it gets into the culture of that time. And during that period of time, people would create family tombs in the hillsides outside of Jerusalem. And those tombs were basically designed to, you go in the door and there'd be a square central court, you might say. And then there would be niches on the other 3 walls. And in the main room, in the square main room, there would be like a stone bed. And when somebody died, they would lay them out on that stone bed, seal the tomb, and leave them there for about a year, so there would be plenty of time for all the soft tissue to disappear. Then they would reopen the tomb, collect the bones, put them in stone boxes called ossuaries. And then those ossuaries would be put into these niches in the sides, of this tomb. In the family tomb of Jesus, when you walk in the door, on the right-hand side, which is the place of honor, there are 3 ossuaries. In English, one says, Jesus, son of Joseph. A second one is inscribed, and again it's in English. It would be the familiar name of Mary, like a nickname of Mary. And it's followed by the title Mara. Mara is the feminine form of Lord. And there is a third ossuary in that same niche that says Jude, son of Jesus. Now that's all very thought-provoking. And there are a number of things in that tomb that are quite unique. First of all, at that time you would not normally put nicknames on ossuaries, and yet the nickname or the familiar form of Mary is on that one ossuary. In another wall, in another niche, there is an ossuary that is marked with another nickname, and it's Josie, and that was what Jesus called one of his brothers. Again, a nickname. It's just quite thought-provoking.
It is, and it's kind of like some of the material suggests that Mary died in France.
Well, she may have, but she may have been returned to the family tomb at a later time, because she and others had, including Joseph of Arimathea, had to escape when the Romans were really going to war with the Jews. And so that's why there were so many in the south of France. But I can believe that after things settled down, she might have been reburied back at the home base, so to speak.
I would think she would want to be.
Yeah.
I would think, that would make a great deal of sense. And having him wandering all over the country as well. Well, wait. There was a piece of papyrus that was found that talked of.
That's the one that Professor, I think it's Karen King, with Harvard, and we get into how that has been authenticated, but it has, I think, 7 or 8 lines on this papyrus.
Yes.
And that's the one that includes 3 lines that indicate he was married, and one where it looks like he's definitely saying, the wife or his wife. So
yeah.
So there's a number of things in the book that all include visuals indicating that he was indeed married, and that would have been the normal thing in that time period.
Well, yeah, and the fact that he was called rabbi constantly would sort of support the fact that because the Jewish community at that time was extraordinarily strict,
right? And
he was a Jew,
right?
So no questions here. He was a Jew. And of course, I have often thought that he would be horrified to think that his teachings had been turned into a religion when he was wanting it to be turned into a way of life.
True.
But we don't need to go there tonight.
No. But anyhow, if anybody's interested in pursuing this further, all 3 books are available on Amazon. Tangible Evidence
Absolutely.
of Jesus Left Behind for Us to Find. Cherokee Little People Were Real, and Underground Military Bases Hidden in North Carolina Mountains. They're all what I call adult picture books, because I always have visuals with the books, and I try to be a bridge between the academics who write these huge academic books that are so thick that the average person isn't going to want to even open them, and I try to find the essence of the most interesting things and condense it so that anybody can read them.
Well, yeah, and you continue that method and that way of putting information out with your website, which is Skyships Over Cathars.
Cashiers. We got Cathars and cashiers.
Cashiers. Yes. I've put the link up inside, and it's on the show page as well. So anybody who's interested can click that link and get over to the website, which is a fascinating website. Thank you so much. And when more books come out, get a hold of me, and we'll put that information out there as well. Because your website alone could take us forever to go through, and I so appreciate your making the effort to be here and spend time with us tonight.
I enjoyed talking with you. I appreciate the invitation.
Thanks so much, and good night now.
All righty, take care.
Thank you, everybody. It's been an amazing show. I so appreciate everybody being here, and I will put up more notice. Check the website out for my next appearance, wherever the heck that is, and have a good evening. Have a great weekend. Stay cool if you're hot. Stay warm if you're cold. And we will be talking at you soon. Good night now.